Remember, quick tip 275 on luminism? Well, this viewer says found a lot of this technique when copying the works of F.E. Church, a member of the Hudson School. And he says, man, I love those Hudson boys. So moody. Any chance you could do a video with your thoughts on what made those guys tick? Alright, here's my thoughts on what made those guys tick. Okay, in case you don't know anything about the Hudson School, I bet most of you do. It was a Hudson River School from the 19th century. I've got it right here for you. From the 19th century, and they sort of spanned for a large part of the 19th century, and the luminism movement grew out of the Hudson River School. So that's the reason he associates it with the Hudson School, because they're sort of one merged out of the emerged out of the other one. But the Hudson River School was unique in that it was the very first Native American school of painting. What that means is it grew out of the love for the American scene, not the European scene as most painters had done before. Up until that time, well, I won't say up until that time, but this group of painters didn't go to Europe to paint like many of the other painters did before them. But they were fascinated with what they found here in America at home. So we could call them the first Native American school of painting. But they grew out of the Romanticism movement. You need to know this stuff, you know. The Romanticism movement was in Europe, but it was sort of throughout. So I won't go into a history lesson, but this is good to know because people ask this kind of question of how do you get moody stuff, or how do you structure this, that, or the other. Well, there was a movement in art that was called the classical movement, and that was a movement that depended upon logic, the logic of arranging compositions and the logic of placing figures and that sort of thing. When then there was a Romanticism movement, it's kind of rebellion of that focused their experience in painting on emotion, feeling, reaction to things. Lots of rhythm and movement in those paintings. So then the Hudson River School sort of just grew right out of that. Now, what made them tick? My take on what made them tick? The love of the influence of light on nature, on things in nature. This was what drew them to the whole nature scene. It was not just painting trees and mountains and rivers and stuff like that, but it was what light could do in those things and how light behaved in those things that they organized their thoughts around, or you might say they organized their feelings around. And that has kind of an automatic built-in mood element to it. So how did they do it? All right, here we go. How did they do it? First of all, they knew their craft. They knew how paint works when you mix it together. They knew how to push the paint with a brush to get effects that they wanted. They knew how to look at the shapes and interpret the shapes. They knew their craft, their technique. So they didn't just dive in and make everything moody and emotional. There was a lot of craft and technique that went on behind that. And they knew how to observe. They knew how to take what they saw and see it not for its imagery, not as mountains and lakes and skies and things like that, but as shape and color and light and dark, that sort of thing. They knew how to observe, and they knew how to take what they observed and take it just beyond a little bit of exaggeration. So if they saw pink in the sky, they would mix that pink but make it a little bit pinker. Now, I would like to take you through a little bit of an exercise to show you how to study these people so that you can understand what made them tick. So you can understand something about their craft, and something about their observation, and something about their exaggeration. Okay, about their craft. First of all, their craft of being able to create the color that they were looking at, and not only the colors but the values within the shapes they were looking at. But they kind of used the shapes as containers made their magic happen with the way they worked with color and value. And so one way that you can study that is through a little sequential exercise where you start out. You can just choose any one of the Hudson River painters. Google them. You'll find that there are several sites where they have several paintings by most of the Hudson River painters. I just got 3 examples here. Asher, Durand, Thomas Cole, and John Frederick Kensett. Those are 3 of the major ones, but there are a bunch of them. So you could find a real wealth of material there to study from, and you could learn a lot from it. So here's a little method you can use if you really want to study and find out what made those guys tick as far as their craft is concerned. So if you look at, let's just take this one. Now, one thing that you can do, first of all, is to determine what's the overall color that communicates to you. Or you might say the overall temperature of the color. All right, so you take a color wheel like this, and we hold it up and we can see, all right, no, it's not the green range, and I can keep turning it around and keep turning around, and then I get in here and I'm finding it's the warm range, falling in here in almost in the red violets, and in, you know, we see lots of oranges right over in here. You see that the yellow oranges over there, the red violets. Those are the major colors that are communicating to us there. So there's where you could start. Now once you decide what the temperature range is, and I'm going to call it, just for the sake of study, I'm going to call that temperature range sort of a yellow-orange to violet. Or then you could just take 2 colors. You take one of the colors that you've discovered in here, let's just say yellow-orange, and take its complement, and that's all you put on the palette for the moment. Put on the palette a dark, middle, and light version of those 2 colors. And then add to the, if it's a warm palette, add to the palette the other 2 colors. Now if this is yellow-orange, then I would want to add to the palette red-orange or yellow-orange. I would want to add a brighter version or a more saturated version. I could also add yellow, and I could add red. So I'd have that full range. Put it back here with the color. Well, this is craft I'm talking about. You're going through finding exactly what those guys did. Alright, so we could go through here and we say, alright, we need to add at least this, and maybe we need to add the ability to get the red-violet. So if we have this, if we have the orange or the yellow to red-orange, and the complement of blue here, and I'm using ultramarine blue there, then if we have red here, plus this blue, we have the ability to do the red-violet that we're seeing. Okay, so knowing that we have all of that, what is the next thing we notice? We notice that those are the hues I'm talking about. We notice that those are really, really low saturation hues. So you can see when I hold this up like this, that doesn't look like that, although we can see a hint of that in there. But we can see that it's really low saturation. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hone in. I'm going to hone in first of all just right in here, because this color, you see this color right here? This color is repeated here, 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 and up here. That color is carrying that hue, well, that whole color is carrying the main theme there. So I'm going to just hone in on that, and I'm going to examine what are we seeing there. And I'm going, first of all, I see when I really zoom in, if you really zoom in close, you see that that's not just one color. That is a combination of, it looks like a combination of a low, of a blue, let's just say a blue and an orange in a low intensity. Well, let's just find out. Alright, so the first thing I want to do is to find the value. So I've got the hues here. Next thing I want to do is to find the value. So I will start with a middle value, because that's what it seems. I hold my white paper here next to that, and I see, okay, it's not very, very light value. So let's just start with a middle value, and I will just put a little middle value on my little test strip. I forgot to say, you just make these out of 3x5 cards, little test strips. You've seen me do this before. And if I do that, let's say that is just a little bit, what is it? It may be a bit dark, and maybe a little bit too intense. Alright, so here's what we'll do. Bring that middle value over here. Bring a little bit, if I say it's too intense, that means I need to add a little bit of blue to it. So I'll add a little bit of blue. Not much, but just a little bit of blue, because blue cuts the saturation out of orange. Now when I say intense, I mean saturation. Saturation means how strong the hue is in the whole color. Alright, let's pull this now, right here, and let's look at that. Almost on the nose of that color. Now what you will notice is that that color is not a thoroughly mixed color, but it's the combination, the mixture is a combination of the blue and the orange. So what I can do with this mixture is go back into the orange, mix a little bit of the orange into the mixture, keeping some of that mixture, go back into the blue, and on the other side mix the blue in. This is just a little process now. If you take yourself through that, you'll begin to understand what they're doing. Okay, check the value again. The value is on the nose. Now let's do a little bit of an exercise. Okay, I see it's broken color. It may say something about where the Impressionists got their idea for broken color. So I'm seeing it's broken color. And so what we could do is we could double load. That means I'll pull the brush, one side of the brush into the cooler color, another side of the brush into the warmer color, and then let's just check it right here and see what that gives us. That gives us very close. But you see how dark it looks here? And yet it looks the same value there. That's because the value up here is darker than my value here. The canvas value is darker than this. So the next thing we would do, and we could continue that, you could continue that study where you are just double loading the brush and not stroking very much, because every time you stroke you mix those colors. You could actually, if you wanted to, you could see a little bit of variation in value. So you might add just a little bit of white to those and still double load, and let's see what happens here when we do that. You see that gives it just a little bit more light. So you see the variation in there as it gets a little bit lighter as it goes over. So I could just keep doing that. Now I'm just going to take that just a little ways here. You can see the variation as it's coming down, getting a little bit lighter as it's coming down. A little cool on one end of the brush and a little warm on the other, and let's pull that right through there. And there you can see that not only do we have the hue, now we have variation in that hue as we see it there. Alright, so that's what I'm talking about, craft. What goes together to make this happen? It's not just inspiration, but the inspiration is up here. It's kind of hovering over us. But you have to have the craft, know what to do, what colors to mix, know the craft in order to make the inspiration work. Alright, then the next thing, I'm just giving you step by step. I'm not going to take you through the whole thing, but what is the next step? The next step is whatever color is beside that one in its value. Alright, so we've checked right here this color. Now we see that there's variation of there, but this color right here, it seems to say to us some sort of blue. Alright, and what value of that blue? Well, let's start with the middle value again and then go from there. So if I just go into straight ultramarine blue at the middle value and hold it up, well, that's way too dark. That gives us a message. So then we can move over here in the lighter part of the blue and mix those two together. Maybe kind of 50-50. That helps to give you control if you do it that way. And so let's just try that. And let's get that lighter version on our test strip, and let's check that out. It's still too dark. Alright, so that means we go a little bit lighter, just a little bit lighter at the time. Don't try, if you go jumping on these things, they can get out of control. So there's a little bit lighter, and that is the right value, but not the right intensity. You see, it's the right value, but a little bit duller, just a little bit less saturated. So then we would go up to the same value of this color. You see, we're dealing with the same two colors all the way through, except for this darker part here. I'll talk about that in just a sec. Alright, so we go into that, we add just a little bit just a little bit of that orange of the lighter value to it, and let's see what we get. To try that again. There we go, right there. Getting closer. A little bit more, just a tiny bit. And you know, you can continue to add orange to blue until it turns gray, and then if you add more orange, it will turn orange again. That's what complements do to each other. They neutralize when you add equal parts. Let's see what we have here. There you go. That's pretty close right there. Now, one way we can sort of test to see if that's working is we can load the brush like that, and we can go right up next to, I don't have that shape the same, but it doesn't matter, just go right up next to that, and then we can see the effects of this against that, which makes this look more like that. Do that again, a little bit more of that blue there. But also it tells us, okay, that first stroke was a little bit too dark. See what I mean? You ask yourself questions, you study here, what's happening here in relation to what's happening there. But you start out with a science of what goes together. First of all, what selections do you make, and then what goes together to make this stuff happen. So the next thing I would do there then is to sort of lighten this up a little bit and go back into my original mixture there, and maybe just sort of, there we go. And that lightens up. I've got to be careful though that I don't mix those too much. You see, the relationship here is very similar. Just those edges just a little bit blended, because the edges do make a difference. You hardly find any sharp edges at all in the Hudson River works. The softer edges are also a part of the effect, that dramatic, almost otherworldly feeling you have when you look at one of the Hudson River painters. All right, so that you can take that process I just went through there, that method of thinking. You can take that throughout, and you'll find that these two colors are probably going to give you every color you see with the exception of this dark. What's the difference? These are the warmer colors. Then he goes into the cooler colors as a value and color, or value and temperature contrast. So let's just do that briefly. I'll show you how that works. Now, what do we have there? We have, you might say, well, that's green. Well, your head might tell you it's green, but look at it more carefully and analyze it. What is the color? Now, we can start, because we have blue on the palette, we can start with the blue, and we see that it's very dark. So we'll just put the very dark blue, and we hold that up. Well, okay, that's not it. Now, the first thing I want to do is just to move to the edge of this darker portion of that same color, right in there. Just a little bit darker version, and let's see if that will give us what we're looking at. You see how very close that is? So you see, really, if I put that right there, let's get that just a little bit lighter so there's a little bit of variation. Let me get another test strip. There's a little bit of variation there on the values, but see how close it is? That is almost on the nose. So we could use this here like that, get that little bit too light there, but the variations, these two darker versions of the same color. And now you see the entire painting was done more or less with two colors. Just maybe a little variation. And this may, I don't know, you get into that, you might find that just a lighter version of right here, maybe a little bit of yellow. But that set of complementary colors gives you, when you're mixing them and applying them not in full mixtures but side by side. Remember luminism? It's the same principle. The same values of two colors side by side will often give you that sort of vibrancy that you see here. And then when you have this blue next to that, the blue next to the orange feeling gives you that vibrancy. And then you have the value contrast next to that, and that gives you that kind of vibrancy. Now you put all those together, you go through the Hudson River painters and look for this sort of stuff. A very limited palette, often complementary colors, sometimes split complements, but look for that, and then look for ways to find the colors that they used and how they contrasted or how they gradated or how they put those colors side by side in the same values. And I think you will discover the secrets of what made those guys tick. Be sure and view all of our quick tips. And while you're doing so, subscribe to the channel, click on the bell so you'll always get a notice when we produce a new quick tip, which is every week. And if you have a question, leave it in the comments section and we'll make a quick tip for you. Also, take a trip over to DianeMize.com where I have full-length lessons, downloads, DVDs, lots of other stuff there, some free stuff for you. And while you're there, you can subscribe to the newsletter, and that way you'll always be informed every time we do something new.